Good morning and welcome to Mental Health Matters with me, Dr. Audrey Tang. Today, our topic is Gen Z. Now, for all you boomers, Gen Xers like me, millennials out there, Gen Z has been proving to be an interesting or sometimes challenging group to integrate into the workplace. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's not always because of them. It may sometimes be because of us. To take an example, at a recent conference, I was asked about taking time off and actually being able to shut down when you're not at work. And the person asking the question said, well, Gen Z seem to be able to do this really easily. And they said it with a bit of contempt or a bit of disgust in a way. I asked them to think about, well, why can't we do that? And actually, should we be better off trying to enforce our downtime? Because we, Gen Xers, millennials, boomers, have grown up in a certain type of environment, we may be thinking something is right and something is perfectly normal just because we have normalized it. But it doesn't mean it's the only way, and it certainly doesn't mean it's the right way. So today's show is all about integrating Gen Z, but about what we can learn from them as well as what we can impart to them. To start us off thinking about this, we have got a new resident expert. It is Martina Kornett. She is from International Dancing Minds, and she's going to give us a little bit of an insight into how she works with Gen Z in her workplace. Over to you, Martina.
Hello, everyone. Just like my lovely goddaughter, Generation Z was born from 1996 into the early 2000s, succeeding the millennials. Gen Z's identity has been shaped by the digital age. They are the first generation who grew up with the internet being part of daily life. Climate anxiety, although that was already actually a thing in my time. Then there is fears of economic collapse, financial landscape changing, student loan debt, rising inflation, and of course COVID-19 pandemic, when most students and even university students had to work and study and learn in isolation from home. So what's so unique about Gen Z? They're obviously very online. They're working, shopping, dating, making friends, video sharing platforms, social media, TikTok. Also, their idealism. They demand purpose and accountability. And they have rather strong values on racial and social justice, sustainability, and climate-related issues. Gen Z has an entirely unique perspective on careers and how to define success in life and in the workplace. Gen Z will soon actually surpass the millennials as the most populous generation on Earth, with more than 1/3 of the world's population. It seems the future of work will call for a return of the Renaissance figure, meaning a person with many talents and interests in areas of knowledge. It will require a fusion of key skills, such as digital and technology skills, comfort with analytics and data, business management skills, and design and creative skills. Companies have to demonstrate their commitment to a broader set of societal challenges. In my places of work, Gen Z is basically the main age bracket of competing ballroom dancers in the age between 18 and 28. In my role as a mental well-being professional, I feel Gen Z is way more open and interested. There's less of a stigma regarding mental health. They are more accepting, and there is less discrimination regarding mental health issues. Generally, in all my places of work, I can't feel a generational barrier. I feel one can benefit from each other, of course, with positivity and mutual respect. So thank you for tuning in, and until next time.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters. It is my real pleasure to introduce Rob Stevens from Optix Solutions. Now, Rob, I've spoken with before, has some really great ways of integrating Gen Z into the workplace. And I'm absolutely thrilled he's joining us today. So welcome to the show, Rob.
Thanks very much for having me back. That's always a good sign.
Yeah, it's always good to chat with you. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the challenges, first of all, that you faced when it comes to Gen Z in the workplace?
I think, the one that everyone sort of hears about is around the level of expectation, which has been raised considerably from maybe other generations. And to a large extent, that's not a bad thing. People should be demanding more from their kind of work environment, their colleagues and their employers. And I guess the discrepancy is where that friction comes in between, the reality that, the Gen Z are walking into versus, where businesses may feel they're at. And that's kind of where that, like I said, I mean, we talk about friction. Because without that kind of friction, without that feedback, there's no momentum, there's no sort of progress, right? So in some ways, it's good to have it.
I love that.
And I think, specific examples are around, individuals' expectations of their kind of working conditions being more personalized, I would say. And I think that's kind of like a really big one where a lot of organizations will have a policy, a process, a way of working. And your Gen Zers are like, yeah, I get that, but that doesn't work for me. So what I need is this. And they're very, forthcoming about telling you kind of how they work best and kind of what their needs are. And I think for a business to get the best out of this generation, you have to sort of have those conversations on that kind of one-to-one basis.
I would agree with that completely, because also it's something I mentioned in the introduction. Just because we've done things a certain way for years, it doesn't mean they're the right way. And there's a lot of things when you have, and I love your word friction, you can say, well, why doesn't that sit right? And actually, is there something we need to change? So along with listening, having those conversations, have you been able to implement some solutions? And if so, what has worked for you?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's probably worth mentioning to people who are watching and listening to this that, we work within a creative industry. I'm gladly one of the owners, and we're able to sort of operate in a very sort of individual way. So we are fortunate in that sense. But also you have to have that kind of will and desire, right? So we can do it, but it doesn't mean that we will. And obviously with these kind of changes to ways of working, a lot of them can actually hit your bottom line. So again, as an owner or as a business leader, you've got to be prepared for that. But at the end of the day, if you say that people are your most valuable asset, then you have to back that up, right? So what does that mean? Well, that means that there should be a budget line for these kind of amendments in your ways of working to enhance your operating environment. Otherwise, it's never going to work. So I think, an example of where that, is kind of being put in practice for us is around the time that we give for development and learning. So we try and dedicate up to a day a week for our team to take on new skills, new learning. But the reasoning behind that is that we then see the team become, more able, better skilled, more efficient. So and our progress over the last sort of like 4 or 5 years have shown that has paid back. But when I first put that in front of our other owners and the board, you can imagine it's like a
whole day.
Yes, you can imagine it's like, you're going to give away a day a week, and we're going to pay for the training. Like what? Like how does that work? And I'm like, well, I don't really know, if I'm honest, but I think we should do a trial. Let's implement it and let's monitor it and let's see what happens over the next 3, 6, 9 months. And that's what we did. And like I said, I think thankfully it has worked. So
That's a really nice, and you talk about trialing it and then checking back and seeing how that worked. And within that, I think the learning is really important, because something that we know about Gen Z, and something that probably we've started to do ourselves, whether we're millennials, Gen Xers or boomers, is information comes to us really, really fast, which means that want to learn to make pasta, you go onto YouTube or a streaming service and you're taught. But because it's there at your fingertips, you don't need to learn it. You don't need to remember it, because it's right there. And so the fact that you're dedicating a day, you're almost teaching learning again. And that is great for all of us.
Yeah, I think continuous improvement is so important for any organization, right? And that having that kind of open-mindedness baked into our operating model, I think it does give us that competitive advantage. So again, we work in marketing. Optix Solutions is a marketing agency, right? So it's very tech driven, it's very fast paced. And if I'm genuinely fearful, right? If we didn't have that time dedicated to learning and development, like how could we then possibly say that we're experts in our market, in our field, if our team were last trained 4 years ago, for example? It's like that doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
So, and like you said, because things are coming out so fast these days, I do sort of scratch my head sometimes and think about, well, how are other organizations enabling their team to stay ahead of these things if it's not built into your operating model?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I'm listening to you, I'm sort of thinking, this is just common sense. This makes absolute common sense, because so many people see training as we dedicate this one time to do it, and then it's almost too much information. So how do you think leaders in general can become better at implementing some of these tools that you've suggested, like your 1 day of training or regular training, or just simply understanding how to better manage different generations, especially when you will be working with people and managers who have been there for a very long time, and they're going to sit there and they're going to go, well, I never did it like that, and therefore...
Yeah, it's I'm not saying this stuff is easy, right? And I think, the internal challenge and battle to kind of win the hearts and minds has to happen before you can kind of go on this journey. So, we talk about, we can give options to people, but we can't force them to kind of, go down this route, right? So if somebody doesn't want, to have a lifelong learning journey, well, okay. I mean, I that's not for me to say that's right or wrong, but in our organization, we're looking, one of the key attributes and behaviors that we're looking for is that kind of open-mindedness and approach to lifelong learning. So that's a key thing that we kind of try and assess even before hiring, right? And there's lots of ways for looking at that. And I think if you're in an organization where that hasn't been taking place already and you want to implement it, then I think just be really clear on why. And what the benefits are for people for being involved, because ultimately I think if you're investing that time and money to make this happen, then there has to be a payback, and again that has to be paid back not just for the business but for the individuals going on the journey. So mapping that out and making sure that everyone is aligned for it, I think, has to happen before you then look at, well, how are we going to do this? So let's at least win that first battle, which is, okay, these are all the perceived benefits and everyone's on board. Okay, great. Well, let's now then look at shifting. And I think everyone's learning journey is different, right? So if you've got somebody who's moving towards the twilight of their career, let's say, if they've got 5 or 10 years left, well, their learning journey is going to be entirely different to somebody who's maybe just come out of university, and they'll be saying, well, hang on, I've literally just finished a degree. I've just spent the last, however many years finishing my master's or whatever. And now you're saying I have to learn, keep on going, like, what's that about, right? And then the other individual is going, well, hang on a minute, I'm retiring in 5 years, so what I've got 30-40 years experience. What is it you could teach me? So
no, that's so true. And a really cheeky personal question here, what's something significant to you that you have learned from Gen Z or learned from doing this more integrative approach to management and training?
To raise the bar, to kind of set expectations higher. I'm sort of like a little bit in awe of this generation coming through. because they were like kicking my ass to sort of move the business forward to be more aspirational, I think, and what's wrong with that, and playing it safe necessarily isn't the right thing for this generation. They're wanting to make an impact, sustainability, the environmental aspect of things are important as well. So all of that has to be sort of blended in, as well as kind of the financial kind of goals and things as well, and the career development. So it is a lot to kind of like take on, but I think as you start to unpick that and unravel it, and if you weave that then into your business goals and your mission planning, your vision, then this stuff, like you said, it just seems like common sense. Well, it doesn't start like that.
It's
But
true.
when you start to kind of put the building blocks in place and you have certain pillars that lift up your overall organization's goals, you can then start aligning people and departments to those to then integrate that. And there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes to make sure like you can actually do this consistently and well. And oftentimes I think it is taking the time out to plan all of that, because doing your day job and all of this on top, it can be quite overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the work that you've done, that's paid off, hasn't it? Because you have recently been recognised with an award. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And then we'll keep you, because we're going to go to break after that. But tell me a little bit about the award, please.
It was a real surprise, and it was campaigns 40 over 40. So I think, first of all, kind of recognition that I've reached that kind of age milestone, which I wasn't probably hugely pleased about.
And now everyone knows.
The other part of it is about recognizing leaders, globally, who are making sort of strides in the industry, as well as bringing, like what we just talked about, that kind of fuller leadership style around the environmental impact, the people leadership. And so I think, first of all, to be recognized in that way was a huge privilege. And when I took a moment to step back and see the other nominees and winners, it was a little bit the imposter syndrome kicked in a bit. I'm like, hang on a minute, how did I?
Oh.
But no, I was very, very pleased. It's very humbling to kind of be in that group of people. And like I said, it did take a little while for it to sink in. But I think at the end of the day, just thank you to the judges and everyone who kind of voted for me.
Oh, well, many, many congratulations, and so well deserved. We are keeping Rob with us, and we'll be back just after this. Welcome back to Mental Health Matters. I have Rob Stevens with me from Optix Solutions, and we've been talking about how to integrate Gen Z into the workplace and how we can learn, how they can learn, and how we can actually all move forward much better. And we've been talking about the amazing award he's received recently. However, Rob, I know it hasn't always been that way. You've had to overcome a number of personal and individual struggles and barriers in order to achieve so much. Do you mind sharing a bit of your personal story, please?
I'm kind of good with this. It's taken a while to kind of be comfortable, I think, talking about this, and I'm pleased to say I'm now in a position to sort of be more open. I think, to sort of set some scene here around this, like I did have a pretty tough upbringing, and a lot of people have sort of suffered bullying at school, whether that be mental or physical, which is hard enough to kind of handle. I also, unfortunately, had a similar situation at home with physical abuse and sort of mental abuse. And that sort of sets the tone. So I think when I was at school, I was very much sort of focused on other things as opposed to sort of what school was supposed to be for, which is, academic learning, right? So the consequence of everything that was going on behind the scenes meant that when I, kind of finished school, I pretty much failed every exam that there was to fail. So at least I was consistent. But at the same time, bumbling into college, I didn't really know what else to do, but eventually sort of fell into a job in London where I was in sales. It was a very sort of high pressured job. I think I kind of got the job because pretty much everyone else quit. So I was the only one there prepared to stay. And the environment at first was kind of quite good for me. There was instant gratification. You have a sales target, hit the target, you get a bonus, everyone celebrates, and that was good for me. But after a number of years, the kind of targets increased, the pressure increased, and I personally was in a pretty difficult place because my coping mechanisms were very sort of unhealthy ones. So, alcohol, drugs, partying, and things became a big part of my life, and that then sort of transpired that it became pretty much all consuming, to the point where I lost my job, I lost my home, my girlfriend left, my friends sort of disowned me, my family did as well, and I ended up living on the streets, which was like a shock, I guess. At first I couldn't quite kind of get my head around what the hell had happened, but I was in a very dark place, and at that particular point, I think, I was in my early 20s, and I felt like this was it. That was, yeah, I just had nothing to live for. I pretty much failed at everything I'd tried. I didn't know where to go or who to speak to. I was very much alone and scared and hungry. Yeah, I didn't really see any reason to go on. But I think at that point, I'd got so low, I couldn't really get any lower, and there were no sort of more bad choices to make because I'd already taken all the bad choices. So I think, thankfully, though, I didn't sort of go through with the whole, sort of suicide attempt thing. And I then thought, well, if I'm not doing that, what am I doing with myself, because I don't want to live on the streets forever. And I was very lucky, very fortunate to have like a family intervention where I was given a couple of weeks of accommodation to then try and turn things around. But it came with some very strict conditions, which is probably rightly so, which, I had to get clean, I had to stop drinking, stop the drugs and all the partying. And I had another chance, but it was like a reset in my mid-20s where, work became almost like my savior. I threw myself into work and thought, let's just give it a go, try and get through each day, not drinking, not taking drugs, and certainly not sort of going into the kind of party rave scene that had been a big part of my life up until that point. But trying to sort of overcome the mental health struggles, where the scariest thing of it all was that I was not in control of my own mind. So there were so many triggers for me that would send me into this huge spiral, that I do have so much empathy and compassion for people who are in that sort of situation, because if you haven't experienced it, it's almost impossible to describe how severe these things can be and how debilitating. But if you're looking at somebody with mental health troubles, often it's an invisible sort of illness, right? So for other people, they'd look at me and see a young man, and fully able and everything, and go, well, you just need to pull yourself together.
It doesn't work that way.
Great. Well, yeah, I mean, if only I'd thought of that. So and so many people sort of had said that to me, like, you've got everything to live for, and, you should be living, this should be the best time of your life. And I'm like, yeah, great. Like, that's super helpful. Thanks so much. But it's actual, I think space and time to sort of make better choices. And I think for me, it was about building structure back into my day, like having a set time to go to bed, having a set time to get up, eat, having to kind of get ready for work, put a suit on again. These sort of more positive behaviors layered on top of each other each day, week, month, year, and focusing on, my own sort of pathway and not comparing myself to others. I think I'm sort of over 25 years now since this kind of like happened. And I think it's important to tell other people this story because, people could look at me and go, well, it's okay for Rob because, he's an MD, or he owns his own business, or, he's married and his life's all well connected. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, that's the case today.
Yeah.
But 25 years ago, I'd come apart in more ways than you can possibly imagine, and trying to pick up the pieces and go again is difficult. And I wouldn't say it's been easy ever since either. You know, there's been lots of challenges along the way, but I guess, you know, through counselling and through support and through, you know, reaching out for professional advice, I've been able to find better coping mechanisms, I think, for when, you know, these events sort of trigger me again. Like, I still struggle, you know, I still, you know, might have thoughts which aren't always the most positive, and I think everyone does, right? But it's sometimes recognizing that you need that help.
Yes.
So if my story helps somebody think and go, you know what, yeah, I things aren't kind of, my life's not quite where it needs to be, or I'm not sort of feeling the joy that I think I should be doing, then I think recognizing that and going and getting help is kind of the absolute first stage of kind of moving things where they need to be.
I think there's two very key things I want to pull out of there. The first is how you said it's not easy. It's not like, oh, and now I got help, it's all done, it's all fine. It's not. You just have a few more coping mechanisms, and we just have to keep on working. I think that's a really important point where we need to have a lot more empathy and compassion for that. But the second point there is, you're right in saying if you haven't experienced it, you do not understand what's going on. And so platitudes like, oh yeah, all you need to do is just get over it, is, oh, you know, that's not helpful. And actually sometimes imposing that structure is about the only way to go. And those are some of the key things that I've certainly taken from your experience. But do you mind me asking, you know, that first moment where you're homeless, for example? I mean, people can't understand that. Are you able to just, I don't know, give us a little bit of insight on how that just feels, you know, when you sit there and go, well, what am I doing tonight?
Yeah, so it's, you know, you don't go from sort of having a home. Well, in my experience, I didn't go from having a home to not having a home.
Yes.
So at first, you know, you understand because you don't have the money to pay the rent or the mortgage or whatever. So that can often take a number of months to sort of transpire. But when that was happening to me, I was at the very peak of my mental health sort of breakdown. So I couldn't answer the phone. I couldn't go outside. I couldn't. I couldn't look at an email or do anything like that. Like, I was completely debilitated. And so the other agencies that would probably step in at that point to try and help, the way that they were trying to help, I couldn't access that support.
Yes.
So I'd isolated myself, but that was sort of my way of trying to get some kind of control. Because if every time the phone rings, it's a debt collector, or if every time you get a letter, it's another sort of threatening letter from a bank or whoever, you know, every email you get is the same, right? So yeah, for me, it was overwhelming, and I didn't know where to turn or what to do with it. So I quickly got to a point where I was sort of forced out of my home. I then was, I think, what they call kind of like sofa surfing. So I had gone round a number of friends' houses, or I'd sleep in my car, but then my car was repossessed, so that wasn't an option. And then I'd run out of friends who were prepared to basically let me stay for free at their house because I was eating them out of house at home or just slobbing around on the couch. And obviously not a great person to have around anyway, because I was in the middle of this mental health crisis. And so people would say after a couple of days or a week, look, Rob, you know, you need to go now. And yeah, you know, you soon run out of friends, right? And it's the same with family. And everyone sort of, I think back then there was less awareness around mental health. So again, there was a lot of judgment around, you know, well, Rob, you know, you've kind of done this to yourself. You know, it's you know, no one forced you to go out partying and, you know, drinking and taking drugs and things. And there are, you know, I now know there's things in my background that kind of caused the kind of behaviors. But yeah, to then move into a position where you're homeless, I think first of all, it becomes about survival, right? So it's like, where am I going to be safe tonight? Have I got any water? How do I get food? And for me, you know, I was suddenly forced into a situation where I was making, you know, I was kind of behaving and acting in a way that just wasn't me at all, you know, but also I that kind of survival instinct kicked in. And I think that's when I realized that I did want to live, you know, I didn't want to just end it all. But it took me to kind of get to a point of homeless and desperation before I realized that actually I wanted to do something with my life. And I did sort of think maybe I could do more than what had happened. So yeah, that was a kind of turning point. But I would plead with anyone to not get in that. Don't wait until you're in that position before you start kind of like being kind to yourself and before you start kind of looking for help and options.
And I think this really reflects in all of the work that you do yourself in your own business now, because in bringing in that 1 day a week of learning, you are bringing in 1 day a week of support, of help, of teaching people it's okay to ask. And do you think those experiences have fed into how you now manage your company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I worked in, PLC land and, for big organizations, I wasn't able to kind of have an impact on policies or processes, ways of working. I mean, yes, to a small degree, right? Within a department, you might be able to get a few little wins in, but nothing that would be like fundamentally, life changing or kind of, business changing. And I think that is part of the reason why I looked for a different way. And so, owning your own business gives you that sort of freedom to take some of your ideas and principles forward in a more, well, for me, a more meaningful way. And, what's been, I think, really nice is that, it's not just the individual award, like with the 40 over 40, but we've also won awards for having the best business culture in the UK, right? We were ranked #1, which, like, out of however many thousand firms that went for that, then that was pretty cool. So I think that in itself kind of gives a justification for the changes that we've made. And I hope other businesses kind of look at that and go, okay, yeah, like maybe there is more we could do, or actually we should really take learning and development a bit more seriously. And how do we do that?
Oh, Rob, well, you're staying with us. We are now going to go over to Business Boost, where I'm actually going to be teaching you a technique which I learned from my last conversation with Rob, which is about reverse mentoring. So let's go to Business Boost. In today's Business Boost, I thought I would talk about one way of better integrating the different generations in the workplace. And this is known as reverse mentoring. Very often when we think about mentoring, it is the older person, the more experienced person, the person who's been there the longest, etc., imparting their knowledge onto the new person. Reverse mentoring doesn't do completely what it says on the tin, in that it's not just the new person teaching the experienced person their outlook and their way of doing things, but it's a two-way street. So whilst you do have the conventional style of mentoring, you are assigned the mentor, the more experienced person, the person who's been there longer, who can show you the ropes and the way that that particular organization works. What also happens is you have reverse mentoring sessions where the new person, often the younger person, can impart their knowledge to you. Now, this has worked informally in many different places. One of our newsreaders, Patsy Wright, she talks about within the arts world, she, as the senior person, always works with all ranges of ages. And in the last show she did, she learned to use TikTok because the younger generation were using it. But in the same way, she was able to impart her showmanship, her experience of theatre to them. So you can learn so much from not necessarily just younger people, but new people. They see things in a different way. Sometimes when we've been in an organisation for too long, we become institutionalised. We forget to ask why. We lose that ability to see something and want to change it because we don't think it's right. Because often we've been told no so many times. However, what we don't realise is sometimes things change, which means that the people who were saying no may no longer be there. There might have been a shift in environment, in climate, in culture. And sometimes it's worthy of giving that idea, that thing you wanted to implement, another go. So when it comes to the workplace and integrating across generations, see it as an opportunity, not just to impart some of your wisdom, but to gain so much more from other people. Give that a go and leave a note in the comments as to whether you've done it and how it works for you. Welcome back to Mental Health Matters. I've got Rob Stevens from Optix Solutions with me. We've been talking about his own work in Optix Solutions to integrate and really lead the way when it comes to managing all generations and creating a really positive workplace culture, but he's also shared his own personal story, his own journey, his own struggles, and the desperation he got to, which also helps him when it comes to creating a compassionate environment today. Now, let's go into the topic of well-being at work, because it's a very fashionable phrase. Now, you're doing it right. Your organisation is doing it right. But what are some organisations doing wrong, and how can you improve that?
I think one of the things that I've sort of been aware of is around the disconnect, really, with owners and leadership teams, sort of personally held opinions and values versus their internal communication, tone of voice, whatever you want to call it. But because I think in some ways it's well-being at work has become something a must-have, right? So everyone's sort of saying, well, we're a great place to work, and it's like, okay, that's not really enough. So, and it's like, well, of course we're a great place to work. We've got employees. It's like, well, yeah, because you pay them. That's why they're here, right? Like, I mean, if you didn't pay them, they wouldn't be here. So you have to kind of go beyond the kind of superficial and really dig deeper into, well, what does that actually mean? Because what it means for every person is a different package, I think, of kind of measures or support. So unless you're really having those conversations on an individual basis across the whole business, you can't really expect to be, a great place to work, right? And you can't seriously kind of expect to have your employees think that you are serious about their well-being. And that takes time and money. So again, I think coming back to a point we raised before, it's about, well, so how much money is going to be dedicated to that? How much time is going to be dedicated to that? Because if it's not in your budget or your forecast, then it's not happening, right? Because it's no point saying, oh, well, everyone gets, I don't know, excuse me, £500 to spend on training. Because I know, some of the training courses can be many thousands of pounds. So it's, £500 over a year. It's like, but if you haven't got the time, so let's say you book on a course and you think, right, it's going to be, a week and like, I haven't got time to do that because no one's put it into my schedule. And, if I go and do that course for a week, I'm then a week behind on all of my other deliverables. So that's not really well-being, is it? It's like you've just added a whole load of stress to me because I've been told I've got this money. I haven't spent it. Now I've been leaned on. I've gone on a course kind of begrudgingly. And now I've got a week's worth of work to catch up. So, thanks very much. That's not that's not well-being in the workplace. It's
logistics, isn't it? It's absolutely that.
So moving beyond the tick box, I think, is more, about kind of putting in the right systems and processes.
I fully agree with you. And sort of relating to that, and also your own experiences, why is looking after your own well-being as important as looking after that of your team?
So I think, your mental well-being, particularly for a leader, is really important, right? Because every business owner, every leader casts a very long shadow in terms of their personal impact in their organization. So if you're, let's start with, let's be kind to each other, right? So as a leader, it's unfair to expect that you're going to be absolutely top of your game all day, every day, without fault through an entire year or multiple years, right? That is an unrealistic expectation to begin your leadership journey with. So, you have to then be able to be vulnerable and be open with your team and be honest with your team about the fact that you are going to have those dips and occasions, and then, explain what they look like, right? So you can tell Rob's having a bad day because, right? And then list those behaviors, right? And if I'm having those bad days, I'm going to give you permission, up front to say, Rob, you can pull me up, or actually, Rob, can you just slow down a bit here? Or actually, I don't think that was quite fair. And you have to kind of empower your team to kind of call you out on those kind of situations and behaviors. And everyone in your organization then kind of can follow suit. But if it's not happening at your kind of leadership level, then it ain't going to happen in your mid-level managers or your kind of junior execs. So I think you have to set the tone, with your own personal behaviors and how you kind of manage those situations.
I mean, very recently, I wrote in my Leaders Guide to Wellbeing about how we need to have those wellbeing audits where you say things like, this is what it looks like when I'm having a bad day, and it's getting your team to know that. It's getting you as a leader to know that as well. And to me, that's an intervention that actually really works, exactly like you said. You can see it in practice. So what's your view on things like the incentives, the gym cards, the food cards, and what interventions have you actually found do work?
Yeah, I mean, all of these packages are great, right? And their periphery, I would say, they sort of help support in our organization what we hope is a real culture of well-being and lifelong learning. But without having the kind of core structure, the peripherals really are just like a veneer of an attempt at well-being. So it isn't really enough, I'm afraid, to sort of say, well, our whole team get a gift box once a month, or they can go to a gym. I mean, yeah, great. Like, I mean, if I really wanted to go to the gym, I'd pay for it myself, right? So so I mean, they're kind of. I'm not saying these things are bad, but what I'm saying is that will pale into insignificance compared to the relationship that you have with your manager, or the relationship that you have with the leader of your organization, right? And if that's not a productive, healthy one, then it doesn't really matter whether you've got gym membership or a box of fruit once a week. It's like, I quite frankly, I could say some rude things there about myself, but what's really going to help a matter is the day-to-day interactions. What's really at the core of your culture, of your organization. But yes, would I say, no, don't do them? Absolutely not. Put them in, but don't believe that will actually fix things. That is a nice to have, not a must have.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And on that note, what would you say is a good place to start for that leader who really does want to do the right thing, but has got no idea? So literally, what is the first baby step to maybe take?
I think, recognition, right? That desire to want to make a difference, for genuine reasons. Like, if you start with, okay, I think we might have a problem, or it's not terrible, but there's a niggling sort of something that won't go away. You have that sort of feeling almost, either in your gut or wherever, to say, yeah, we can do more, right? Well, you reach out to someone, speak to a professional, right? So there are, some really good people out there, whether you're talking about, bringing on board a fractional, chief people officer, or whether it's a consultant of some type. But I think, speak to somebody who's been there and done it, somebody who, has worked in your kind of type of industry and been able to kind of take an organization through that transformational change. Because they can fast track you and provide you, if you're the leader, right, and you really need that support. There's no harm in saying, I just don't know.
Yeah.
I would much rather, personally, I'd rather work with somebody who's open-minded and said, look, I just need some help, as opposed to somebody saying, look, everything's great here, but we've got like 30% attrition and I just don't know why. You're like,
Yeah, no, it's like, it's getting in touch with someone like you. And on that note, where can we find you and learn more about you?
Yeah. So optixsolutions.co.uk, I'm available through the website there. I'm on LinkedIn as Robert Stevens, MD of Optix Solutions. And very soon I'll be launching my own consultancy. So some new news.
There we go.
So wavemind.co.uk. The website's not quite live yet, but hopefully next month we'll be going live. And I am, I'm kind of hoping to kind of help businesses transform and go on this journey.
Oh, there we go. You heard it here first. That's so exciting. Congratulations on that new business. And I think you would be such a great person to speak to, because you've been there and you've done that. It's not like someone coming along going, oh, I've got the MBA, but you've not had the experience. Whereas Rob, you have not only been through that transformational change, but you've been through that transformational change yourself. It has been such a pleasure, as always, to chat with you. Please do come on the show again when you've got your consultancy going as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Rob. He's wonderful. Do look him up. And we're now going to go over to a new segment where we test some wellbeing trends. So today I had a chance to look at the ONIRI app. Now, the ONIRI app is a dream app. I don't know whether any of you journal your dreams or whether you like to dream interpret. It's not something I've ever necessarily done, and actually sometimes I just don't remember my dreams. Coming from a psychological perspective, I always think that dreams are just my brain's way of organizing things, and that seems to be backed up by research. However, there are these things called lucid dreams, and lucid dreams are kind of a little bit more exciting because the whole thing about lucid dreams is often you can direct what happens, and that can be a lot of fun. And the ONIRI app suggests that you can even train your brain to have lucid dreams, which kind of means you get a little bit of escapism whilst you're asleep. But let's look at what this app does. You can download it on Apple or Android, and there's a free version and there's a paid-for subscription version. In the subscription version, you get a few more facilities within the app. But in the free version, even then, you can just journal your dreams. You can write them down, and the more you write them down, and this is something I've noticed over the last month, the easier it is to remember dreams. Previously, I would probably remember dreams maybe once or twice when they were really, really vivid, or when I woke up having those dreams, in the middle of those dreams. But now, having done this for a while, I'm actually able to remember, even just a little bit later whilst I'm brushing my teeth, oh, I actually had a dream last night, and I write that down. Now, it doesn't necessarily help me to sort things out in my head, but one thing that the app does is it prompts you to think about what that dream could mean. It will also, if you pay for the subscription, give you an interpretation and analysis. And what I find quite helpful about that is it gives you the themes that often come up. And when you're writing down the dream, you can also add in, are there people who come up? Are there events or situations and places that come up? And again, that can be helpful. Now, whether you find the interpretations useful or meaningful, that's up to you. But certainly for me, having used the app, what I find is A, it makes it a lot easier to remember that I've dreamed at all. B, when I write them down and then take a moment to reflect on them, whether it's just afterwards or whether it's a little bit later in the week, I can sometimes see patterns. And again, as a psychologist, I like looking for patterns. And if I notice a pattern in the emotion of the dream or the overall vibe of the dream, that can give me something to think about. And often when I do dig a little bit deeper, admittedly, it is still my own self-narrative trying to interpret this. I do begin to link it with things that are going on day to day. And at the very least, it reminds me that that's something to think about. So if you want to have a go, try the free trial first. If you like it, subscribe to it. You do unlock a lot more features if you do that. But it's the ONIRI app, O-N-R-I. You can get it on Apple or on Android, Google Play. Give it a go. It will prompt you to remember your dreams, and then it might even help you because it gives you other bits of information and articles to read. It might help you have more lucid dreams. It might help you when it comes to interpreting the dreams. Well, welcome back to the last part of Mental Health Matters, where usually Judith and I, and she will be back in a couple of weeks, she's on holiday at the moment, when we reflect upon what's happened during the show. And one of the key things I've taken from Rob is this whole need for friction. Friction's a good thing, and I love the way he's got words to put onto, those feelings that you have, and that's why he's going to be so brilliant if you need that support. He's been there, he's done it, and he's done it well. Friction is important, because friction means there's something isn't right, and if you just look at it, you might be able to find a solution. And it may not be that you look at it and actually you need to change everything. It might actually be you look at it and you only need to tweak something. Or maybe you don't need to look at it and change anything at all. Maybe it's a case of different perspectives having different interpretations. But either way, friction, challenge, anything like that is actually really positive. Something that I've learned about resilience is simply that adversity, the troubles that you've been through, they create conditions in you so that you can thrive next time. And had you had it all plain sailing, had there been no friction, you may not realize those things exist. It's a little bit like, and the researcher is called Carver, he likens it to a child having chickenpox. You have chickenpox and then you build up a physical resistance, and so you're much stronger when the virus comes around next time. Same thing. Adversity helps us. Friction helps us. So this week, even if you're facing a challenge, friction, see it as an opportunity and have a healthy week.